So the minor premiers were bounced out in straight sets at the weekend. So the Crows lost to the Hawks by 34 points. JB, as I said, you were there. It was a bitterly disappointing finish to their year. They really didn't give much of a yelp in either final in the end. Christian, the writing was on the wall from the first couple of minutes, though. We talked about hot starts just before, and the Hawks got possibly the hottest start of the weekend.
Yeah, first 3 goals of the game. So using the actual time, so not sort of taking off the time off time. So it was 4 minutes and 17 seconds it took them to score their first 3 goals of real lifetime. That's the fastest 3 goals we've seen to start a final on record. So since 99, since timekeeping for scores has been around.
So that's total time, not just the game time.
Yeah, so it would have been even less if you look at how much time had actually been.
So you're including the
clock.
30 seconds between getting the ball back to the... Yeah, right.
Yeah, so as I said, that to be able to keep it consistent and measure to all the way back to 99. Sort of the quickest, fastest 3 goals. So it's probably only 2 minutes of actual game time in that. So, yeah, straight from the start. I mean, you even look at Jai Newcombe, first 3 centre bounce clearances in the first 3 minutes of the game. He won 4 of the first 5 centre bounce clearances, all went to one player. And then he won 1 more centre bounce clearance for the rest of the game. So he set the tone early and was great. Finished the number 1 rated player once again.
Hang on, so that's now 4 in a row. So 4 finals.
4 finals played, 4 top-rated players across all of them.
Mr. September is starting to get a bit of a ring to it.
It was so notable how dominant he was from the get-go. When Hawthorn were on the front foot with those first few centre clearances, they just had that front half game going, and it was all on the back of Jai Newcombe. And the Crows didn't have an answer for a long time.
You were there, as I said. What was the crowd like after those first few minutes? Were they shell-shocked? I mean, there were 53, I think,
to be
thousand
honest,
there.
it was really loud. Like, the Hawks fans were making plenty of noise. Like, I describe it as electric, especially when you're scoring early in an away final and your fans get up and about when you're kicking those quick goals. The noise was genuinely considerable.
Christian, we spoke earlier in this podcast, or throughout the year really, about how this year has been more of a turnover game kind of season than a clearance game kind of season. And we sort of wondered if this would translate into finals. Well, it certainly did in this final because the Hawks were able to get the turnover game going and the Crows were not.
Yeah, so absolutely smashed from turnovers across the game. So you look at clearances, which is one of the main score sources. Adelaide actually won 32 points from clearances to 29 against Hawthorn. So small part of the game there. But from turnover, 4 goals, 28 for Adelaide. 10 goals, 72 for Hawthorn. So 44-point margin straight from turnovers. 14 more scoring shots from that source as well. So it could have been worse with the accuracy. But you look at Adelaide's ability to score from turnover. First week of the finals, they scored from 14% of the times that Collingwood turned it over. So Adelaide's intercepts, if you will, which is their 4th worst game this season. And they only scored from 12% of their intercepts against the Hawks, which is their 3rd worst game this season. Their 2 lowest games this year came against round 14 against Hawthorn, which was horrible conditions.
Tasmania.
Tassie. And round 23 against Collingwood was their 2nd worst scoring from turnover games. So it's almost like they couldn't have come up with 2 worse opposition because they weren't able to do it during the home and away season. We spoke about how it was definitely looking like it was going to be the key way to score during finals. And they've just been outplayed from both of them. So even from their own, looking at their ability, we spoke about Adelaide all year, not being a back-end team. They weren't able to score end-to-end all year long. Their ball movement probably improved slightly in the finals compared to home and away, but it was their forward half intercept game. So 31 points per game from forward half intercepts in the home and away season. So that's been able to lock it in your forward half and score again. Just 13.5 points per game across their 2 finals. So even their own ability to score off their own intercepts was no good, but their ability to defend the opposition as well fell apart. So looking at the 2 sides of the game, you can clearly see why their finals fell apart so quickly for them.
This can't just be on missing a player like Isaac Rankin, can it, JB? I mean, the structure has held up for so long and players have come in and out of sides all the time. What did you see? Was it just as easy as that, or were the players shell-shocked? Was everyone not on? Like, what do you put it down to?
Well, the ball use was quite poor going forward. And you can look at someone like a Tex Walker, who's like the barometer and the energiser of that team. When he has an off game, they tend to have an off game as well. He was missing shots that he'd usually probably kick, making poor decisions going forward as well. But a lot of that's on Hawthorn's pressure as well. And you talk about intercepting and scoring from turnover. You just said it. It's exactly what Hawthorn was doing. It's as much the way that their defence set up the ground as it was Adelaide's poor ball use. Because Hawthorn's defence is probably the best backline in the comp, at least on paper. And the way that they set up the ground, it was just so obvious that it was going to be difficult for the Crows to score.
They're also the best at putting pressure on the actual ball carrier, Hawthorn.
But it didn't matter that a player like Josh Worrell, who, as I said before, like Hawthorn obviously had that really quick start once Adelaide settled into the game, and then they were able to sort of get a forward half game going. It was on the back of a Josh Worrell who had an incredible first quarter, 33 touches, 10 marks, I think it was in the end, game high in intercepts. But that was amounting to nothing because of how good Hawthorn was defensively.
So we talked in the lead up to finals sort of what each team's Achilles heel might be, and it was the depth in Hawthorn's midfield. So if Hawthorn's midfield is shallow, what do we think about Adelaide's? Because as you said, 33 disposals for Josh Worrell led the game. Next best was Rory Laird, who they threw in the middle a couple of times, but, again, a half-back flank. Then it's Wayne Miller, same thing, 23. Max Michaelaney, 22. So these are all defenders so far. And then it was Jordan Dawson, the number one midfielder, with 21 disposals as that leading guy. I mean, this midfield just doesn't bat deep enough.
And then Mark Keane with 19. So only one midfielder had more than 20 disposals. So it was Jordan Dawson with 21. Pete Ling with 17 was their next most.
Well, Rankin is the one, you said him before, he's the one that you can throw in there for a bit of spark. He wasn't there, so...
But even so, I think you got to have just more... You got to have an accumulator in there. Someone who can get their hands on the ball first and dish it out. That Dunkley type. Well, that's someone who can sort of just...
It's the Matt Crouch and the Rory Laird types who have... Adelaide have moved on from having them in their midfield. So it's almost the thing that they were... Probably had a point of difference across the year is they didn't have a high reliance on someone to get 30 every week for them to win. They could sort of share it around, but now in finals, it's sort of you get found out because of the exact same thing that you sort of were hanging your hat on during the home and away season.
So the Rory Laird one's really interesting. So he had 14 centre bounce attendances across the final. So 28%. So 1 in 4 centre bounces he was in there. In the home and away season, 0. So that was I don't want to say break glass in case of emergency, but that was clearly the thinking for Nix when Rankin went out. But it's just not the same. You're just patching a different hole, right?
Yeah, I think he played a very different role. Good tackler, as he said, good in and under player, but he probably doesn't have that breakaway, not so much breakaway speed, but that breakaway ability that Rankin has to get the ball moving forward quickly.
I think they'd want to get a lot out of Sid Draper as well, who's going to get another pre-season. He could be the midfielder that they have been missing for so long as well. Next year, though, would you play Rory Laird as a midfielder if you were Matthew Nix, or would you keep him on half-back?
No, I think you keep him at half-back. I think we've seen 2 or 3 years ago he was playing midfielder. I was surprised he wasn't in there at all during the home and away season. As you said, 1 in 4 centre bounces. I'll probably throw him in there every now and again. He's probably a good tagger or cool-off player if you want. If someone is getting hot, you can put him in there in the 3rd or 4th quarter and put someone down.
But he clearly wasn't in those plans for the entire home and away
exactly.
season.
They didn't really have a plan B in the home and away season. Rankin, Rochelle probably went in there a little bit. Both of those were obviously, Rochelle didn't play first final and didn't appear in a centre bounce this week. Rankin obviously not playing, but it's who is it? There's just no one that sort of stands out as who is there, Zach Bailey or Cam Rayner or even someone like Nick Watson for Hawthorn, who they can just put in there 3 or 4 times. Adelaide don't have.
JB, first minor premier to go out in straight sets since, I think, 1983. Yep. So that's a fair while. They also just didn't win a quarter for the entire final series, so 0-8 in quarters.
Yeah.
Is this a fail for the minor premier?
No, I don't think so. And we do our pass marks as well. And we gave them a pass because their pass mark for this season was returning to the final series. So they finished bottom 4 last year. They played finals this year. That's clearly a good step. But I think the way it ended, people are going to look at it like it is a fail. But they did finish on top of the ladder from a bottom 4 position last year. And while it is frustrating and disappointing to look at it as a straight sets exit, I think too much is being made of, they lost to 8th. How close was this top 8 this year? So last year, the 8th team, Carlton, was 2 wins ahead of 14th. This year, the 8th team in Hawthorn was 8 wins ahead of 14th. That's the golfing class and the talent difference between the top 8 and the bottom 10 this year. It was that tight. It shouldn't matter. It's a myth by saying, they shouldn't have lost to the 8th best team.
So is it a case of maybe buyer beware of a team that has a bottom 6 fixture one year? Sorry, finishes in the bottom 6 to then have the bottom 6 fixture the next year if they make the jump. So if a team from the bottom 6 this year makes the jump into the top 4 next year, are we right to be wary about them in finals?
Naturally, I think so. I have had a look at this. So Adelaide had the 3rd easiest fixture this year when you look at the difficulty of their double-up games and the average ladder position of the teams they played twice.
Which also can be luck in terms of how the other teams...
It can be, and they still have to beat those teams at a high percentage. They deserve to finish where they did. But Hawthorn, Brisbane, Collingwood also in a prelim this year. They had 3 of the 4 most difficult fixtures in 2025. So is it more important to get the easy fixture, maybe your game isn't in as good a shape as it should be? Or is it having a hard fixture, but your game's in good shape, you're playing against better teams, so you might not win as many games, but your game plan is going to stack up in finals.
Well, I think that the stat that you just mentioned there, they went 0-8 for quarters one. That's the first time ever. So going back all the way to 1897, that a team has gone 0-8 in quarters in finals. So
is that a team that finished first, or just in general?
Any team. So for any team to have played 2 finals and not to win a quarter in any of those finals. So that's the one for me of. You got a lot of things you can go back on in the home and away rounds and sort of say, yes, this is what we want to build and this is how we're going to, this is our DNA and this is how we're going to get ourselves to finals. But what fell apart in finals that you couldn't even win one quarter? And it is a few of the things that we would have spoken about. As I said, their ball movement was slightly better in finals, but it was a worry all year. And you knew that once it became a more transition and thought out game like finals was, they were going to struggle. And you talk about, some of the depth and just trying to find players. Just to have, who can you sort of throw behind the ball if it's getting at it? There's no sort of forward that can go behind the ball. There's probably no midfielder that can go into the forward line and sort of pinch hit for a few goals. They're sort of very one-dimensional in terms of where they play, which has been great all year, very predictable. But then it came to finals and you could see it by the second half of Hawthorn. There was no plan B, really.
I worry a little. 2 better teams.
Yeah, I worry a little bit about what this does. Straight sets exit, these kind of stats, and how this mentally affects them. I mean, GWS last year doing the straight sets thing after being in winnable positions twice. It's tough to bounce back from. So we'll keep an eye on the Crows in earnest, that's for sure. And the other semi-final, the Lions, now into a 4th straight prelim, JB. Took care of business against little brother Gold Coast by 53 points in the end at the Gabba. They started hot, the Suns, but I think they spent all their tickets. And Christian, Jake had a feeling about the Suns last week, but you and I were a bit more pragmatic. We sort of said, we probably think the Lions are going to come back and bounce back. And the Suns, had, as I said, sort of spent their tickets and all their emotional and physical energy. And at the ground, a few players really sort of struggled to replicate their best form and had some down days, some of the worst for the year, actually. Yeah,
and it's probably their sort of peripheral players or their sort of...
impact players.
Yeah, impact players. The guys, Anderson, Rao, they still rocked up and still had pretty good games. Collins behind the ball and things like that. Ben Long had his 3rd worst game for the season, so finished with 4 disposals and just 1 behind for the game. Bailey Humphrey had his 3rd worst game for the season. I think his previous 2 were probably, at least 1 was sub-affected. So he had 14 disposals for the game on the weekend, but only 1 effective kick amongst those 14 disposals. John Noble had his equal lowest rated game for the year, so he had 22 touches, but a team high 6 turnovers. And Lockie Weller's another one who hasn't been a huge part of their team, but has sort of gone along quite nicely and sort of become a regular again this year. But he had his 2nd worst game for the season. So a lot of those guys that you sort of probably wanted to support the main inside ball winners, they were all sort of down on their game across the night.
It's hard to make a lot of this game when it comes to Gold Coast because it's so hard to elevate your game when you're coming off such an emotional high from the week before and winning your first ever final series. It's only natural that there is a little bit of a drop-off against a team who had their backs against the wall like they've done all season. Brisbane responded like they should have and like we all probably expected. So I'm not really too down on the Suns. I think Dimmer nailed it after the game where he said we're a good side, we're not a great side. So now their challenge is becoming a great side.
And that's you build experience.
Yeah.
This is how you build experience. So not only have these Suns now played a first final, they've played 2.
Yeah.
1-1, experienced that high and had that sort of emotional lift. And they've now been sort of had that emotional low where they do get, quite frankly, spanked. And now, had to walk off the ground and sort of say, well, all right, well, this is where we are in relation to the league's best teams. Christian, it was a sort of a typical Lions performance for me. I don't know what you thought, but they smashed them in all areas. Plus 56 in disposals, plus 17 in clearances, plus 29 in marks, which is just classic Lions, and plus 7 in tackles. So both with and without the ball, they just smashed the Suns all over the park.
Yeah, exactly that. And their numbers for, sort of head-to-head numbers were great. They won all the areas. But the other thing you look at is Gold Coast's ability to score from stoppages was always going to be their greatest strength. And the last time they played against each other, I think it was 45-1 straight out of the centre. So Brisbane got outscored by 44 points from centre bounce clearances. And Gold Coast just embarrassed them out of the stoppages all game. So across the night, Gold Coast only scored 1 goal, 2 from stoppages. So just 3 scoring shots from their number 1 scoring source all year. But it was their ability. They still got their hands to the ball first. So we talk about stoppage first possessions and clearances. So first possession is just getting your hands to the ball first, and clearance is actually getting the ball outside the stoppage area and sort of moving your way. So across the night, the Lions allowed Gold Coast to turn 58% of their first possessions into a clearance, which is their lowest percentage in any game this year. So Brisbane sort of knew that, all right, Rowell and Anderson, we can't stop them from getting to the ball first, but we have to be right on them to limit their ability to do anything with it. So either let them get the ball but just tackle them straight away and cause another ball up, or cause them to sort of handball the ball out into a loose space. So, first quarter they were plus 14 in tackles and sort of losing the first possession count. But it was almost like we're sacrificing our game because we know you're going to get there first, make it really, really hard for you to get to it. After the first quarter, Gold Coast sort of tried to change things, too many things around at the stoppages and started to lose first possession. So it was almost a really, really smart performance by Brisbane of, okay, what's Gold Coast's greatest strength? Let's sort of concentrate on that for 20 minutes. After we get that in order, we can start playing our game, take the corridor, play that fast, ball movement by foot, and they just play the game on their terms for 3 quarters.
We talked earlier about Jai Newcomb being a Mr. September. Well, there's a guy that plays for the Lions who might have something to say about that. In fact, he's already got a Norm Smith medal wrapped up. But in the second quarter, with the game in the balance, I mean, the quarter-time margin was quite narrow, just the 1 point. With the game in the balance in the second quarter, there was one guy who really stepped up.
Yeah, Will Ashcroft had the second highest rated quarter of any Lions player this year. So he had the 9 touches, 7 contested possessions, 3 clearances, 2 goals. There's sort of, when Lachie Neale has played and sort of comparing with and without Lachie Neale, his numbers with Neale and without Neale are very similar, but he averages, I think, 2 more score involvements and almost twice as many score assists per game. So his ability sort of to keep winning the same amount of ball without Lachie Neale, but then he sort of goes,
more quality ball as well.
Yeah, and I'll become more of a forward half sort of ball user and things like that. Nearly every game he's played without Neale, he's been the number 1 score assist player in the game.
What was really evident was just how hard he runs. Runs from the back line to the forward line in waves, or he runs back as well. Like, in terms of the Suns' midfield, can get a little bit trucky at times, whereas he was just on it, sprinting forward and back and being a link-up player. His second quarter was absolutely magnificent, so it doesn't surprise me at all that his quarter was the second ever best by a Lions player this season. JB, if you had to give the Suns a grade for this year, where would you be sitting on that?
I'd be giving him an A if you wanted a letter, because they've made their first final series. They've won a final as well. I think it was probably expected this year to at least push for finals. It probably would have been a fail had they not made it. And they, in the end,
that's fine line.
What?
Like it's an F if they finish outside the 8, but like an A if
given
they
the way the season panned out, it would have been
winning a
tough
final, I guess you're taking into account as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But the Bulldogs won 14 games and didn't make it in the end. It depends on what happens. So every year is different the way you look at it. But they should have finished in the top 4. If they don't slip up against Port in Ken Hinkley's farewell, they finish in the top 4 and get a double chance. So that's how good their season was in the end. So I'd have to give them an A. I don't think you can go less than that. It's a pretty monumental step for a young group.
Any thoughts, Christian?
Yeah, I think I sort of really like listening to a coach afterwards. And I think Damien Hardwick, as he said all the things that you wanted to hear a coach say. Sort of, we're not there yet. They're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. They're just got to go from good to great.
He knows the players are listening to that as well.
Yeah.
That's a message to his players for sure.
Yeah, everything, as I said, it's, to me, everything, especially a premiership's usually a 2 or 3 year journey. It just doesn't happen in 1 year. So they're on the right path for a premiership in coming years.